realistic. A successful offensive would require more troops and equipment, efficient logistics, air power, and strategic leadership, none of which SADC or the SANDF has demonstrated the ability to provide. That leaves only one option: follow Malawi's lead, repatriate our dead, negotiate safe passage for our wounded, our surviving troops, and our equipment. Get out. Then we must face the truth. The SANDF is broken. We need to go back to the drawing board, reassess our entire defense strategy, and rebuild our armed forces from the ground up to the level of the competence that South Africa needs. And for that, we need leadership. Strong, decisive, competent leadership. Something the SANDF has not seen in a very long time. Even the SANDF's official X account, that's Twitter account, posted this damning statement, and I quote, "One day we will know the real reason President Cyril Ramaphosa appointed Angie Motshekga as the Minister of Defense. For now, it simply doesn't make sense." I close the quote. We agree. They are right. It doesn't make sense. Let me make this clear. We need to withdraw from the DRC immediately, and Minister Angie Motshekga must go, voluntarily or otherwise. The time for excuses is over. Lives are at stake. Leadership is failing, and South Africa cannot afford to stand by watching the predicted life-costing humiliation unfolding any longer. I thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable KMN Kigaba.
GNU.
Honourable Speaker, honourable members, I stand before this august House with a profound sense of respect for the men and women of the South African National Defence Force who devote their lives to safeguarding our nation and promoting peace across the continent. We must never overlook their sacrifices and the silent, often unsung acts of heroism they perform on our behalf. To guarantee our peace, safety, and stability, promote our sense of nationhood, and extend our hand of solidarity and good neighborliness with fellow peoples of Africa beyond our shores. We gather today to mourn those who recently lost their lives and to reflect on our obligations given the powers entrusted upon us to ensure that the living are spared a similar fate. Therefore, guided by the Freedom Charter's timeless creed, that there shall be peace and friendship, we must use this debate to reflect on who we are, what we can improve, and where South Africa's foreign missions stand with regard to the well-being of the whole of Africa. Honourable members, the SANDF's peacekeeping efforts are not happening in a vacuum. They are part of the larger vision of the African Union's Agenda 2063, which aims to silence the guns and foster a peaceful, integrated, and prosperous Africa. South Africa has consistently taken a leadership role in advancing this agenda, promoting diplomacy, conflict resolution, and sustainable development as the foundations of enduring peace. Our peace and prosperity are inextricably linked to peace and prosperity for our neighbors. The challenges our continent faces demand collective action. No country can go it alone, and we cannot sit back as our neighbors suffer the deprivations and degradations of war. The Freedom Charter instructed us to respect the right of all peoples of Africa to independence and self-government, and to use that as the basis of close cooperation with them. We understand that our efforts to bear fruit must be grounded on close cooperation with fellow African countries, together seeking African solutions to African problems, and to ensure the durability of our efforts. South Africa does not approach fellow African countries as a bully, a big brother, a messiah, a know-it-all, do-it-alone tyrant but as part of a collective of African countries acting together to secure life, achieve stability and sustainable development. The recent losses should neither distract from this vision nor coerce us into a retreat from our progressive internationalism, as if South Africa has never and will never seek Africa's solidarity in times of unforeseen tragedy and turmoil. When South Africa was enveloped by a dark cloud of apartheid tyranny, Africa acted together to help bring about a brighter day of freedom. Africa's united action under the guidance of the OAU ensured that the apartheid regime was isolated everywhere on the African continent, so that even those who sympathized with it did not have the courage to do so openly. It was the governments and peoples of this continent who rallied the world behind our cause and rallied support for the isolation of the apartheid regime, ensuring that it was kicked out of all international bodies and supported our struggle by offering asylum to freedom fighters and provided military and other forms of support to our struggle. A free and democratic South Africa can never forget that worldwide generosity, and particularly the sacrifices of the peoples of Africa during our moment of darkness, especially those who lost their innocence at the callous hands of the regime of death and tyranny because of their steadfast support for our struggle. Honorable members, South Africa's reputation as a leader in peacekeeping and regional stability has three broad pillars, namely a commitment to development and good governance, a commitment to resolving conflicts through dialogue, mediation, seeking African solutions to African problems, and thirdly, a commitment of our armed forces to participate in peacekeeping missions. As Parliament, we must therefore ensure that this commitment is supported by the necessary resources and oversight. As for the third pillar, this SANDF continues to play a vital role in peacekeeping missions, working alongside regional and international partners to uphold stability and security on the continent. As stated earlier, our efforts remain aligned with Africa's broader peace and security agenda, ensuring that we contribute meaningfully to lasting peace in conflict-affected areas. South Africa has a proud history of contributing to peacekeeping efforts, demonstrating our commitment to stability and security across this continent. Through diplomacy, mediation, and the deployment of our peacekeepers, we have played a vital role in supporting conflict resolution and post-conflict reconstruction. Our efforts continue to uphold the principles of African unity, ensuring that peace is built on dialogue, cooperation, and long-term development. Ultimately, sustainable peace cannot be imposed, but must be the outcome of multilateral efforts and dialogue. In addition, all our peacekeeping efforts are supported by post-conflict reconstruction and economic programs to stabilize vulnerable states, tackle the underlying causes of conflict, and foster the conditions for lasting peace. Honorable members, in today's digital age, the spread of misinformation and intentional distortions present a serious challenge, not just to our national security, but to the public's trust in our institutions. It is therefore crucial that the role of the SANDF in peacekeeping missions is communicated clearly and accurately to the public. We want citizens to grasp the strategic importance of these efforts as part of a broader mission to usher in lasting peace and development on our continent. It is essential to strengthen public awareness initiatives that highlight strategic objectives of the foreign policy and the pivotal role of the SANDFs in advancing South Africa's interests on the continent. An informed and engaged public will contribute to a greater appreciation of our peacekeeping efforts and reinforce national support for policies that foster stability and development across Africa. Honorable members, the SANDF is a non-partisan force at the service of the nation as a whole. Its work must not be treated in a partisan manner or as a partisan service. Our soldiers work in perilous conditions, and their commitment should not be exploited or deflected by partisan interests, particularly whilst they are on serious international mission. We must promote public confidence in the SANDF to uplift the morale of our soldiers and assure them that they enjoy the full support of the nation as a whole, as well as its leadership, regardless of political affiliation. We must demonstrate our commitment to transparency and accountability by providing constructive solutions to enhance the performance of our armed forces. We must ensure that our defense force remains robust, our soldiers are adequately trained and equipped, and our peacekeeping initiatives continue to promote African unity and stability. It is important in this regard that the presiding officers consider the request of the Joint Standing Committee on Defense to have a debate on a separate occasion on the general state of our armed forces. Honorable members, we would like to convey our heartfelt condolences to our fallen soldiers. Our thoughts and prayers are with their families, as well as those who are wounded. We convey our full confidence to those still on duty in foreign lands. The whole nation stands with you and will continue to provide you with all the support you require successfully to fulfill your mission and return home safely to your beloved country. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable E.M. Chigila.
Honorable Speaker, members of the Progressive Caucus, I greet you. South Africa carries a revolutionary, historic and future obligation to guarantee peace and stability in the whole of the African continent. This must be done in conjunction with all other patriotic Africans in the entire continent. Like all African countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo is our strategic ally and must remain as such. There is nothing wrong with South Africa's participation in peacekeeping missions, including in the DRC, but such should be done with maximum support and military capacity, which this government is not providing to the South African National Defense Force. Our soldiers were surrendered to rebels by this government, which has neglected all aspects and facets of the army. We are fully aware that there are many role players in the DRC, including foreign governments and businesses that drive through the destabilization of the DRC. We as Umkhonto weSizwe believe that South Africa and all other progressive forces in the African continent must not retreat and neither surrender to the rebels and the external forces that are at the center of the ongoing conflict in the eastern part of the DRC, particularly Goma. Honorable members, the DRC is kept in perpetual conflict because there are forces that seek to loot natural endowments and mineral wealth. The African continent must never surrender to the DRC to external forces and rebels sponsored by foreign governments and private role players. When President Zuma was president of our country, there was never an attempt to attack our forces because they had maximum support. We are fully aware that the military intervention where our was part of the Samir, South Africa's participation in any peacekeeping mission should however be strategically placed, well-funded and supported, whether as part of SADC or United Nations. We know from the reports of our soldiers on the ground that the South African National Defense Force, particularly its Air Force capacity is being systematically decapitated and weakened. Without a well-capacitated Air Force, we will not win the battle against rebels and will not be able to silence the guns in the continent. South Africa is supposed to have the strongest and the most organized Air Force in the entire African continent, which under the current political leadership would be used to back up our peacekeeping missions whenever they are deployed on the ground. The grounding of the South African Air Force, symbolized by the humiliation absence of a flying past at the recent presidential inauguration, is a glaring testament to how far the defunding of the South African National Defense Force has gone. Honorable members, the inability to fill aircraft for ceremonial duties is a symptom of a broader crisis. A military that can no longer fulfill its mandate to defend national interests and support peacekeeping operations effectively. Our forces are left vulnerable due to inadequate funding, outdated equipment, and poor logistical support. The lives of our soldiers are put at risk in hostile environments with insufficient protection, and now we are seeing the tragic consequences. The government must be held accountable for sending our troops into danger without necessary means to ensure their safety. Under President Zuma, South Africa played a key role in bringing peace and stability in the DRC, supporting military and diplomatic efforts to curb violence and foster democratic transitions. President Zuma's administration provided substantial support to peacekeeping missions and actively engaged in conflict resolution efforts. President Zuma played a leading role in supporting the peace, stability, political and economic progress of the DRC because he understood our progress and success as a people cannot be separated from the development of the entire African continent. Additionally, to military and peacekeeping deployments, President Zuma played a leading role in safeguarding the political stability of the DRC in order to realize socio-economic progress and prosperity. We as Umkhonto we stand here today to make the following demands, directives on what is to be done. One, South Africa and all other African countries and continental organizations must continue to play a meaningful diplomatic, economic, political, and military roles in the DRC with the aim of safeguarding maximum stability and economic progress. Two, South Africa must fully support SADC and the Eastern African Community Joint Summit resolutions to declare ceasefire in Goma, that the Chiefs of Defense Summit resolutions to declare a ceasefire or forces ceasefire to support the Chief of Defense Forces Summit resolution to declare that we develop a security plan for the region within 5 days. That South Africa must fully support the idea brought by President Zuma in 2014 of establishing an African standby force, which will combat all forms of rebel movements, terrorist activities in the African continent. It is only a unified African standby force with maximum ground, air force, and naval capacity that can sustainably defend our continent from sponsored destabilizations, which is done for the theft of our natural endowments. That we demand the restoration of the South African Air Force, the army with full operational capacity, and that its top priority, that should be its top priority. Also, that to also develop and implement a sustainable peacekeeping strategy. And number 5, the government must invest in local defense manufacturing so that our armed forces have the necessary equipment and resources, reducing reliance on foreign suppliers and strengthening national security. And lastly, Chair, Madam Speaker, the South African government must broaden and strengthen our economic cooperation and integration with the DRC. Immediate task in strengthening the economic cooperation should include strategies to complete the Inga hydroelectric project, which will be a turning point to the economic life of the DRC and the entire subcontinent. Failure to provide systematic support to the DRC will be surrendering the country and its natural resources to the rebels who are sponsored by external forces. The African continent must refuse to surrender national endowments and mineral wealth to the West, which continues to pillage our natural resources. Let us reinforce our capacity and work with collective to continue safeguarding the DRC. We should never surrender or never retreat and should never appear like we are running away from the rebel groups. Africa must rise. Maibu, yeah. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Abaskakne.
Honorable Speaker, Winston Churchill said, "Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. If there ever was a time to sit down and listen, it is now, Mr. President, Commander-in-Chief of the Defence Force. South Africans are burdened, they are suffering. The loved ones of 14 dead soldiers are mourning. The families of about 2,000 of our troops trapped in the Democratic Republic of Congo are worrying about their safety and if they will ever see them again, asking, what are we doing there? Armed conflict has been a part of the DRC for more than a decade, and South Africa has been involved in various missions in the region over the years. But concerns over SANDF readiness were already raised in 2016-17, when Mission Tebe trained 9,000 FARDC recruits to create a rapid reaction brigade in the region without proper authorization. It was later reported that 55 million had to be borrowed for the instructors, rations, and logistics. And as at that stage already, our Defence Force did not even have the money to undertake the most basic border patrols. Honourable Speaker, our soldiers are developed on a long-standing peacekeeping operation, but the current situation, as we have heard firstly through social media, is that our troops are trapped and encircled by the M23 rebels without communication, without support, and apparently without a way out, living in conditions that would not be out of place in conventional warfare. What we as South Africans hear is Goma is the transport and trading hub of the region. Trading legal and or illegal and critical minerals contributing to the just transition is one of the contentious issues between the DRC and Rwanda. Conflict escalated since January 2025 despite an agreement between the DRC forces and M23 rebels. More than 500,000 people have been displaced since the beginning of 2025. Hospitals can't cope with the wounded. Food and water is a problem. They fear a cholera outbreak. Thousands of soldiers and civilians already lost their lives. Our soldiers did not receive the support they needed. Our soldiers' core objective was peacekeeping. However, the feedback from the Defence Minister to the nation is that they have to neutralize negative forces, and the President last week said that we are contributing to a safer Africa and limiting weapons in Africa. I have to ask, is this still peacekeeping for the noble cause of the maintenance of peace and security in our region? If it is, we need clarity and transparency on where our intelligence was in the build-up to this incident, or was it again ignored, like in the July 2021 insurrection? On what do we spend the United Nations reimbursement of $1,000 per month per soldier to countries volunteering uniformed personnel to peacekeeping operations? Can the Minister of Defence somehow convince us that our soldiers' training equip them for the offensive peace enforcement they are doing under the guise of peacekeeping operation? Honourable Speaker, this is a moment in our history that will be recorded as our nation's failure to protect, support and shelter our own soldiers. It leaves us with the impression that our men and women in uniform are not one of our country's priorities. The defence budget has been under severe strain for more than a decade, resulting in a woeful lack of proper training and resources. The previous ANC governments failed to prioritise our defence force for years. The Defence General Staff and Ministers of Defence waxed lyrical about wanting to be a security force to be reckoned with in the SADC, while they did send a message to our soldiers and our nation that they do not care. Honourable Speaker, Churchill also said, the price of greatness is the responsibility. So please, Mr. President, take up the responsibility and withdraw our soldiers immediately from the DRC. Ensure that the core functions of the Defence Force are funded. Make the lives of our soldiers matter and address the shortcomings of African peace-led operations through diplomatic solutions. That will demonstrate responsibility and care, the totality of greatness. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable J. Malima.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Speaker, I would like to begin by sending our condolences to the families of the 14 members of the South African National Defence Force who recently lost their lives in the DRC. We cannot continue to refer to them through a number because they've got names. We salute Staff Sergeant William Edikola. We salute Staff Sergeant Molatley Ishmael Molatley. We salute Staff Sergeant Swatani Theophilus Sepe, Corporal Matumi Justice Malesa, Corporal Renae Namavulani, Lance Bombardier Itumeleng McDonald Moreo, Lance Corporal Zeke Moffat Molapo, Lance Corporal Metzi Stensley Rashishi, Rifleman Svatani Richard Chokwe, Rifleman Derek Maluleke, Rifleman Tsidiso Andres Mabele, Rifleman Calvin Louis Moari, Rifleman Muketi Joseph Mobe, Private Peter Jacobus Strido. The reckless deployment of South African troops in the DRC under the South African Development Community SADC mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, SAMI DRC, which began in December 2023, was presented to us as a peacekeeping effort. However, the truth is that our soldiers are not there to maintain peace. They are engaged in a direct combat, fighting against the highly armed and strategically superior M23 rebels who are supported by the reckless president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. Our government has deliberately misled the people. The reality is that our soldiers are fighting an enemy that has better weaponry, better resources, and better intelligence. While the rebels possess advanced military equipment, our soldiers are sent to battle without drones, without fighter jets, and without critical military assets. They are left vulnerable, fighting a war they cannot win, all because of the failures of this government. The recent M23 offensive on Goma has highlighted significant shortcomings in the South African National Defence Force deployment. Intelligence failures were evident as the SANDF lacked timely and accurate information to anticipate the M23 movements, leaving our forces unprepared for the assault. Coordination between the South African National Defence Force, regional allies, and the Congolese military was inadequate, leading to a fragmented response and over-reliance on local forces that quickly collapsed under pressure. The SANDF response can also be criticized for its sluggishness, allowing M23 to seize strategic positions before effective action was taken. Political considerations were often overshadowed military necessities, limiting our forces' effectiveness. Leadership on the ground also failed to provide clear directives, resulting in disorganized retreats and unprepared casualties. These issues culminated in tragic losses. For over a decade, we have watched as the South African National Defence Force has been systematically weakened. Budget cuts have crippled our military ability to function effectively. Aircrafts and helicopters that should provide air cover for our troops are grounded due to lack of maintenance. The government has neglected its duty to ensure that our soldiers are adequately prepared and equipped for combat. This is despite the fact that this deployment has cost our government 2.3 billion since it began. But it does not end there. The defense sector has been ravished by corruption. Officials at Denel have looted and mismanaged funds, selling South Africa's defense technology to foreign entities. This is nothing short of treason. At the same time, the Department of Defense has wasted over 250 million outsourcing IT services while ignoring existing in-house capabilities. This is a blatant theft of state resources, and it is our soldiers who pay the price. We must be clear, the deployment of our troops in the DRC is not about achieving peace. It is about sacrificing our soldiers for war that has no end in sight. This government continues to send them to die in foreign land, and when they do, their bodies are not even repatriated with the dignity they deserve. We are still waiting for the bodies, even after the Chief of Defense said the bodies will come the following day. The South African National Defence Force soldiers who passed away in the last few weeks have still not arrived home, with several delays being blamed, which is unacceptable. The families of these fallen soldiers are left waiting, grieving and struggling for answers. Our troops be brought home immediately. We cannot allow more lives to be lost in a senseless conflict while corrupt politicians continue to loot and mismanage our defense resources. Bring them back home now. This past weekend, South Africa participated in a joint SADC and East African Community Summit in Tanzania to discuss DRC crisis. We agree that there must be ceasefire, and we agree that the chiefs of the military must come together to create a clear passage of the ceasefire. Re role now baetapele ba ANC
honourable member,
le
your
rekisitse
time
bana
is
ba
up.
rena le re tsegisha ka
Honourable
matekere. Thank you.
Inkosi RN Cebekhulu.
Honourable Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. The Inkatha Freedom Party is profoundly saddened by the tragic loss of 14 courageous soldiers in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We extend our deepest condolences to their families, loved ones, and the entire South African National Defence Force. The IFP recognizes the vital role the SANDF plays in safeguarding peace and stability, both within South Africa and across the region. We commend their unwavering dedication to protecting our continent and fostering peace in the DRC. The recent escalation of violence and the provocative war-baiting rhetoric are deeply concerning and entirely unacceptable. The IFP unequivocally condemns such actions in the strongest possible terms. Furthermore, the IFP believes that South Africa should continue to play a strong role in promoting peace and stability among other African states, and that it should support the programs of SADC in the United Nations. Every effort must be made to find lasting peace through diplomatic engagement and negotiations. We must silence the guns. We, therefore, warn against an abrupt and uncoordinated withdrawal of peacekeepers in the absence of a commitment from all states and parties to ensure that lasting peace will be guaranteed. South Africa cannot afford another wave of influx of refugees and asylum seekers, which would be the case if the summarily withdrawal troops at a time of uncertainty, instability, and rise in hostility. Our presence in the DRC remains strategic for peace. Peace in the DRC means peace in Africa. With regards to South Africa's contribution to the SADC peacekeeping mission, we need an honest assessment of the state of the SANDF. At this time, we should caution against finding financial solutions to non-financial problems. The IFP will not prematurely call for an additional budgetary allocation to the department until a thorough assessment has been done. This has been witnessed by the findings by the SIO of how finances have been mismanaged in the department. Our position is based on the understanding that increased budgetary wrongly assumed to proportionally rise in defense capabilities, which is always the case. Despite the department's critical importance, some unpatriotic individuals shamelessly exploit and loot its budget. The IFP believes that it is time to devise a constructive plan. The road ahead requires bold leadership from all sectors of our society to ease the anxieties of peace-loving South Africans. Ngqongqoshe sithi ayibuye imizimba yabafowethu nodadewethu swelakele kuleli yazwe. Ababuye bezofihlwa ezweni lesemkhulu ngesizotha nenhlonipho. amaqhawe namaqhawekazi abeyodala ukuthula noxolo kuleli yalizwe lase DRC ukuze abantu bakhona bekwazi ukuhlala ngokuthula njengoba kwenzeka lapha nakwamanye amazwe. Izwe lethu iSouth Africa iyingxenye yamazwe abumbene ukudala uzinzo kanye nokuthula ezwenikazi lethu iAfrika. Umlando usibikela ukuthi iSouth Africa ike yaya kuleli yalizwe yaletha ukuthula eDRC kwaba impumelelo. Siyaphinda sithi dudu kwizihlobo nabathandiweyo babafowethu abalimele besebenzela emsebenzini wesizwe belaphana eDRC. Sengathi kungashesha ukubuyiswa kwezidumbu zabo ukuze imindeni isheshe igcine izimfanelo zokubabeka imizimba yabo phansi ngokuthula nesizotha. Siyathokoza.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kulu. Honorable Jim Mackenzie.
Honorable Speaker, from the Patriotic Alliance, we just want to give our deepest and most sincerest condolences to the families. But Speaker, I think this House, all of us, need to do some soul searching. We cannot be leaders. We are busy debating here while our soldiers are not back. The families of the ones that died must now watch on TV, hoping to get some information. There was no rush for this debate. This debate could have been moved until we got our fallen soldiers back, and then we can come here and speak about this. Speaker, this is not the time to point fingers. We have been humiliated. We have been humiliated. We have been humiliated. And we must teach people, when you kill a South African, there's consequences. We are sitting with the highest youth unemployment in the world. Let us use this opportunity and call for conscription, Honorable President, and bring our young people and train them. And while we train them, let us go and teach M23 a lesson. Let us go and kill those that killed our soldiers. I don't know, Speaker. These ones are talking a lot here. We need soldiers. You call yourself Commissar, you call yourself CIC, we need you there. There's people that we need you to go fight. We are tired here in Parliament of toy soldiers. We want, this is war. People are dying. You are calling yourself titles here. Go and fight. I will be one of the first to join the battalion to go and fight. Let us go and get our people, and you must follow me. Let's go and fight real fights, not these fake names of the army. I salute you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable the Minister of Correctional Services. Honorable Groenewald.
Geachte voorsitter, die feit van die saak is, ons het natuurlijk almal medelee met die...
Order, honorable members, can we allow the member on the podium to be heard? Order. You can go ahead.
Ons het almal medelee met die geliefdes van die gesneuvelde soldate. Die feit van die saak is, dit gaan hulle nie lewend maak nie. Why did it happen what happened in the DRC? We have two defense reviews, one in 1998 and one in 2015. The result of the 1998 defense review was that we bought some of the most sophisticated armaments in the world. The Gripens, our submarines, it has cost the taxpayers of South African billions of rands. In the defense review of 2015, where the review in itself has cost a couple of millions to compile, certain recommendations were made. But no attention is properly given to those recommendations. What happened with our most sophisticated armaments? They are dilapidated in a certain sense because there's not enough money to ensure that there is proper maintenance. And therefore, yes, it is true, we can participate in peace missions in Africa. But then we must be sure that we are equipped and properly prepared to do that our soldiers are well trained and that they have the necessary support. Now, this is not the first time that we're in a situation like we have at this moment. In 2013, we had the Bangui situation in the Central African Republic, where we've lost 15 soldiers. Now, everyone in the military knows that after such an incident, there is proper re-evaluation on what is or what went wrong and what must be done to ensure that we don't have a repeat of what happened. And the DRC is nothing else than a repeat of Bangui. Therefore, we must ask, who must take responsibility? Now, the most disturbing of this whole matter, Honourable Speaker.
Order, Honourable Member, can you take your seat? Honourable Skosana, what is the point of order?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The interpreter of Iske to Isindebele Asikola.
Okay.
And I don't want to start that again because I've been saying this many times, and it looks like we are being undermined. Some of the section of our society is heavily undermined. It's unacceptable, Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will attend to that, Honourable Member. Honourable Neval, you can continue.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The most disturbing aspect was actually reported in the newspaper of a report by the well-known and accredited journalist Erika Gibson. And what she said is that there were senior generals in the SANDF that actually insisted that the President, as Commander-in-Chief, must be properly informed that we do not have the capabilities to send this mission to DRC. But the top generals prevented them to put forward that information. Now, Chairperson, Honourable Speaker, the Freedom Front Plus asked the President to appoint a judicial commission of inquiry into these allegations. Because if we do not attend to that, then we are in a fortnight of a military coup and the President won't even know it. I thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Trollip.
Madam Speaker, none of us can feign surprise why we are debating the tragic loss of 14 of our soldiers' lives in the eastern DRC. It is clear that we have learnt no lessons from the fateful Battle of Bangui in the Central African Republic, and that perennial budget cuts have emasculated our defence force. In fact, the hollowing out of our defence force began with the corrupt manipulation of arms procurement facilitated by the erstwhile President Zuma and his associates. This not only placed the defence force in a precarious financial position, but it has also continued to constrain its operational effectiveness due to the unaffordable maintenance and lack of capacity to deploy the said armaments. This has been compounded by progressively ineffectual and inexperienced ministerial and military leadership appointments. On the 15th of July, my Action SA colleague Lerato Ngobeni outlined the inevitable consequences of the systematic hollowing out of the SANDF's capabilities in the Defence Committee. These are her notes, and she said, "This department has been severely mismanaged and underfunded for decades that is placing it at a perilous risk. She went on and warned of the dire consequences of our sovereignty and the lives of our men in uniform. And she said the misalignment of the budget in the deployment to the SADC mission is going to expose our men and women to fierce militant insurgency while being ill-equipped, overstretched, underfunded, and without sufficient combat and intelligence support. She asked the minister, how many more lives must be sacrificed before this government acknowledges the urgent need to overhaul the state of our armed forces? Minister, you studiously ignored the question because you are clearly out of your depth, and our national security is not only compromised, but our defense force is rudderless. Now, 6 months later, we mourn the deaths of 14 brave soldiers whose decomposing remains have yet to be repatriated, not to mention the absence of any plausible casualty evacuation plans for our wounded. The Deputy Minister, a general, appeared bemused and at times even surprised as he listened to the department's defensive denialism. His silence in the committee when we met as a joint committee exposes why we oppose the existence of deputy ministers. They are impractical, ineffectual, and superfluous. The department's political and military leadership sat in that committee and presented like hapless hares in the spotlight. Our warning has fallen on deaf ears. Our ill-equipped, under-resourced, demoralized, and outgunned soldiers were sent to fight in a war which we have no apparent demonstrable interest, and they were set up to fail and die. I'm proud that in October last year we rejected this government's reckless attempt to throw an additional 2 billion rand at the deployment in the DRC. We refused to support this folly then, and we are even now more determined than ever to demand its end. As confirmed by Minister Mochega in her reply to my parliamentary question, she said the deployment is devoid of strategy, lacks a clear national interest, suffers from inadequate capacitation, and frankly has no defensible reason to continue. Minister Angie Mochega must resign or be fired by the end of the day. Our troops must return before the end of this month.
Order, Honourable Member, your time is up.
Thank you very much.
Honourable Swart.
Speaker, the ACDP would also like to extend its deepest condolences to the families of the 14 brave soldiers who died in the DRC. During last year's defense budget vote, the ACDP warned that we must either ensure that our deployed troops are properly resourced or bring them home. Now, what does properly equipped means? It means air combat support, Roy Falk helicopters, proper medical facilities, logistical capabilities, radar defense systems, artillery, drones, and heavy mortars. These were sadly lacking. Speaker, we all agree that the defense budget is insufficient, and therefore we need to also accept responsibility, because those parties that passed that defense budget must also accept responsibility. We cannot deploy our troops in this more offensive peace enforcement role. This was not peacekeeping. This was an offensive role to neutralize negative forces and arms groups without proper resources. Senior ranking officers warned against this deployment, citing significant operational risks. Their concerns were ignored. They were even reprimanded. This information was not given to President Ramaphosa. Other officers also indicated that there was a lack of planning and said they were killed because of a failure of planning. The troops on the ground stood no chance since they landed in the DRC. This is an absolute scandal. It is scandalous. There was insufficient pre-deployment planning and training to meet this ideologically and technologically more advanced Rwandan-backed M23. Where was the military intelligence? And whilst acknowledging that our troops fought like lions, particularly our special forces, and that the M23 sustained heavy losses, it's becoming clear, abundantly clear, that this was indeed a mission impossible. Our Commander-in-Chief, President Ramaphosa, should hang his head in shame. The Minister of Defense should hang her head in shame. And we, who did not appropriate sufficient budgets for the Defense Force, should also hang our heads in shame. We don't need another debate on this issue. We possibly need a judicial inquiry, but at the very least, we need a full parliamentary oversight inquiry into this humiliating defeat, which has not only cost the lives of our troops, but has severely damaged our reputation and that of the SANDF. The mothers and families of the deceased soldiers demand and deserve nothing less. Lastly, we welcome the immediate and unconditional ceasefire calls within 5 days. Bring our troops home now,
Order,
we call.
Honorable
Thank
Member,
you
your
so
time
much.
is up. Honorable Ngwangwa.
Speaker, we would like to extend our deepest condolences to the families of our fallen SANDF heroes. And sithi benze Thixo baphumle ngonaphakade ubakhanyisele ngokhanyiso olungacimiyo. Contrary to popular belief, our soldiers were deployed in the Democratic Republic of Congo to engage in a peace enforcement operation, not a routine peacekeeping mission. A peace enforcement operation, as most of you might already know, ensures that is carried out by heavily armed forces as they have to engage in non-defensive kinds of combat. How they were not properly resourced for this is absolutely beyond us. In fact, it's a dereliction of duty on the part of those who decided the mission. Facing a well-armed M23 rebels supported by the Rwandan Special Forces, our soldiers were not humiliated. They fought gallantly despite being outnumbered, outgunned, and under-resourced. However, due to dwindling ammunition and relentless attacks, they were forced to surrender and are now being held captive under very inhuman conditions. There were times during this process when they were told when to perform their ablutions, what time and why and where, which was an attempt to try and humiliate them. This, of course, in these dire circumstances, our troops are forced to ration their provisions. For an example, what they call as red packs, originally designed to provide a single meal, complete meal, are now being stretched over 2 days. This stark measure underscores the chronic shortage of essential supplies, such as food and water. In fact, in some instances, they had to wait for rainwater in order for them to be able to get water and to be able to wash their clothes. We have to attend to these challenges which are faced by SANDF. One of the issues that as soldiers, unlike their counterparts from SADC nations, South African troops do not have to receive direct payments from SADC. Instead, their salaries are funneled through joint operations, a process that has unfortunately invited a lot of corruption. When an emergency hits at home, they have to pay for their own repatriation at times to attend funerals of relatives, while the opposite is true for other people who are deployed in the mission. So indeed, there needs to be a thorough investigation of how these missions are done, conducted, and how and whether we are going to properly resource them. To our soldiers, we must accept, I quote Martin Luther King Jr., we must accept final disappointment, but never lose infinite hope, no matter how difficult the circumstances might be at times. Bring our soldiers back home right now.
Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Honourable Zibi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We honor our fallen heroes, wish the wounded a speedy recovery, and send strength to their families and their colleagues who are still serving in the DRC. Honorable Deputy Speaker, a debate on the Defence Force was long overdue. For the last decade, successive parliaments have approved budget cuts that have put the lives of the members of the armed forces at risk. We cannot keep sending Defence Force personnel with knives to a gunfight. The words members of this House say, calling the dead sons and husbands to broken mothers and wives heroes, means zero if this Parliament will this year vote for a budget that amounts to peanuts. Those brave soldiers should have had the benefit of close air support, which they have had before, but they had little to nothing this time. The latest Auditor General report explains why President Paul Kagame can give interviews with disrespect dripping out of his mouth for our country and our president. A country the size of a district municipality feels emboldened to poke his fingers in the eye of this nation. This is why the SANDF force has seen a decline in the number of hours their key assets have been productive, with aircraft flying a total of 712 hours for force employment. This is down from 12,000 in 2012, 2013. This decline has taken place under each financial year since 2013, without exception. This amounts to criminal negligence. The decline in available capabilities has had an impact on training and development, with several aircrew losing their currencies. The decline is caused by the reduction in Arms Corps dockyard capacity, as well as the inability of DNL to procure material for our troops. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have a senior officer corps that refused to submit to civilian oversight, have overseen a collapse in governance and strategic procurement, financial planning and leadership. Such an environment costs lives, such as we have seen. 3 things must happen. The first, we need a new strategic plan for the Defence Force, the Navy and the Air Force, including the hiring of younger personnel to strengthen our capabilities for the long term. Second, the Minister must table an enhanced budget for the armed forces, and this Parliament must reject it if it is inadequate. Third, the President must install Defence Force leadership that will run that institution properly and not get the sons and daughters of South African mothers killed. Anything less will dishonor the memories of the soldiers we send on such difficult missions. The time to act is now. Thank you.
The Honourable Maimane.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, members of this House, to the leadership of the Defence Force that is here, Bagaetsho dumelang. Let me begin by asking the fundamental question in saying, gore, ga ne le bana ba rona, a ne re ka kgona go nna bo botlhe mo ntlong ye, re ba re a ba ye ko ntweng, ko DRC, ba sena ditlhobolo, ba sena thuso, ba ile go swela fale. Honourable members, I want to send my deep condolences to the families who have lost their loved ones. It is often said that soldiers die in fields they have not chosen. The leadership of this House chose that field to be the Eastern DRC. And ultimately, the question will continue to haunt us. If these were our children, would we send them? I want to highlight a few things. The distortion of facts is simply this, that we are going on a peacekeeping mission. No, we are not. We are going on a combat mission with no equipment, with no supplies, and our young people are being killed there. Furthermore, fellow South Africans, I want to say a few things that must happen, and I want to be unequivocal. Let us bring back our troops back home. They have no business there. It's getting worse by the day. People are dying. More people are being displaced, yet we keep thinking we can come here by tinkering with the budget and send more troops. It is not going to result in peace. The second issue is that the financial sustainability of this war is not there. Under Operation Tiba and Operation Vigela, we took money from social development, sending troops to Mozambique and other places, and said, let's send our troops there. What we are in fact saying is that while we go to the DRC, for the South African child, there will be no more teachers, no more social development. We simply don't have the fiscal wiggle room to send troops to the DRC. Thirdly, we are sitting here with the corpses of our troops still stuck in the DRC. If we are serious in honoring their lives, we should take every effort to bring back our troops home. It is an immediate call, fellow South Africans. And ultimately, I want to urge that our leadership role must be one to find a peaceful mediation. Let us call for a dialogue between M23 and Tshisekedi so that we can find a response there. Let's ensure that Rwanda withdraws its troops from DRC, and let's compel Rwanda's government to dismantle the FDLR. It's the only way we are going to find. Lastly, this parliament must commission inquiry to ensure that we find out how many have died, what the financial implications are, and how quickly do we end this circus that is taking place. We are not silencing the guns, we are increasing violence. And therefore, honorable members, I leave you with this question. If these were your children, will you send them to DRC? Thank you.
Honorable Zungula.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Firstly, we want to extend our condolences to the families of the soldiers who lost their lives in Goma. At no point should our army be deployed on a mission without the necessary resources to ensure their safety and operational success. We need to seriously develop a coherent and clear foreign policy and the role South Africa should play on the continent. South Africa risks being viewed as a new imperialist power in the continent, not because of any grand ambitions of our own, but due to the reckless and short-sighted foreign policy decisions of this government. In remembering the demise of our heroes, we should ask ourselves, what should be the consequences for those who send our soldiers to die in poorly planned missions? Missions where the objectives are unclear, the strategy is flawed, and the alliances we form raise more questions than answers. One of those questions is, who exactly are we fighting alongside? Did South Africa at any stage fight alongside the FDLR in the DRC? We need absolute clarity on our role in this conflict, especially given the complex web of interests at play in the DRC. The Minister of International Relations was asked a simple question, yet he failed to provide an adequate answer. Is South Africa fighting alongside the FDLR? And if yes, who gave that instruction? Minister, today we demand an answer. It is a fundamental principle that we do not fight alongside non-state actors under any circumstances. Doing so sets a dangerous precedent. If it turns out that our army was deployed alongside non-state actors, those responsible for that decision must be held accountable because the blood of our fallen soldiers is on their hands. Now that the DRC army has fled Goma, what exactly is the purpose of our army's continued presence there? Without the DRC army, the SANDF has got no mission in the DRC because the soldiers were deployed to assist them, not to fight on their behalf. It is also deeply concerning that only South Africa, Malawi, and Tanzania were part of this mission. The SADC has got 16 member states. Where are the rest? Why is South Africa always expected to carry the burden alone? To our brave men and women stuck in Goma, you are not alone. We carry you in our hearts and spirits. Our prayers are with you. You have represented the country with bravery and honor. There is no army or rebel force in the continent that can match your expertise and willingness to stand for others, even in the most unfavorable circumstances. Remain strong.
The next speaker is the Honourable Shilembe.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, the DA wishes to convey our heartfelt condolences to all the families who have lost their loved ones, and our prayers are with them during this difficult time. May the soul of our heroes rest in peace. Honourable Speaker, let me make it clear at the outset, if the Department of Defence and military veterans was not being run into the ground, South Africa would not have lost 14 brave soldiers in the DRC. This was laid bare in the meeting of the Joint Standing Committee on Defense, which was held on the 4th of February 2025, where the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, Honorable Angie Mosega, and the Chief of Army, General Mapanya, failed to answer even the most basic of questions that were being asked by the members of the committee. They refused to tell us who advised that our armed forces were prepared for this mission, or indeed who told the President that our crippled SANDF was ready to fight a battle thousands of kilometers from their homes. It was a shameful display of arrogance, pride and ego, and total lack of care for our troops and their families. In terms of our Constitution, Chapter 11, Section 200, it is stipulated clearly that the primary object of the Defense Force is to defend and protect the Republic of South Africa, to safeguard its territorial integrity and its people in accordance with the Constitution and the principles of international law regulating the use of force. It is disturbing that the DoD in its current form cannot satisfy even that objective, and instead of sorting out the collapsing defense force, the department would rather deploy our soldiers to the fast deteriorating conflict environment in the DRC, ill-equipped, unprepared, and unsupported, then swallow their pride and admit their devastating failures. The grand-scale looting at Denel during the 9 lost years of state capture left this entity with no capacity to meet the demand of the SANDF and has crippled the capacity to supply the SANDF and security environment with strategic technology, capability products, service, and support. The question that we have to ask ourselves is how the President can make a commitment to the African Union and the United Nations and deploy our poorly armed soldiers to the DRC, ostensibly for peacekeeping purposes, fully knowing that the SANDF is not combat ready to deal with the M23 rebels backed by the Rwandan soldiers. The correct answer is that the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, either doesn't care or was ill-advised. It is the responsibility of the President and Minister of Defense to ensure that our soldiers are combat ready before they are deployed anywhere, especially in areas like the DRC, where the heavily armed M23 rebels have long been on the advance. The DA finds it bizarre that the President, the Minister of Defense, decided to continue with the deployment despite serious challenges in the Defense Force. South Africa does not have proper strategic airlift capabilities to ensure effective logistical lines between South Africa and Goma. South Africa does not have serviceable C-130 airlift aircraft in SANDF. We rely on outsourced private planes to transport equipment and personnel to the DRC. Our attack helicopters, Rooivalk, which proved very valuable in 2013 when the SANDF and other forces repelled the M23 out of Goma. This time, there were no serviceable Rooivalk to be deployed. South Africa does not have drones and unmanned aerial vehicles, whereas the M23 rebels were manned with modern technology, including short-term distance drones, whereas we have a very limited capability in this regard. Long-distance unmanned aerial vehicles could have helped with intelligence gathering or even for specific airstrike. The Summit DRC force had a very small contingent of G5 artillery cannons. However, the offensive force such as Summit DRC should have had a larger artillery component, preferably including more G5 cannons and multiple rocket launches. The families of our deceased heroes are mourning because the DoD failed to support their troops, because the armed forces failed to guarantee our soldiers, because the Honorable President would rather stick his head in the sand than confront the truth, and they died on his watch.
Shilembe, your time has expired.
The DA reiterates that our soldiers must be brought back with immediate effect. I thank you.
Honourable the Minister of Defence and Military Veterans.
Thank you very much,
Deputy Speaker, let me acknowledge my colleagues, the ministers and deputy ministers, members of parliament, ladies and gentlemen. Chair, allow me to thank the Speaker for allowing us time and space to debate this very important and yet tragic matter, which has attracted a lot of public interest regarding our deployed soldiers in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Chair, let us remind ourselves why South African Defence Force is in the DRC, as there has been a lot of debate around this issue. To remind ourselves, and I think my colleague has said it, one of the pillars of the South African foreign policy position is to contribute to the creation of peace and stability on the continent and the world. Our country's foreign policy position was adopted by the democratic government since 1994. And in support of this policy position, South Africa has participated in a number of these missions, at least 23 of them. Some of them led by United Nations, AU, and SADC. We've been to Lesotho, to Burundi, Ivory Coast, Ethiopia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Sudan, and Liberia, just to mention the few. House Chair and honorable members, when it comes to the DRC, I also want to remind this House that South Africa's first Commander-in-Chief, Rolihlahla Mandela, very early in our democratic championed peace-building conflict resolution. It is thus to make, it's no mistake that our SAS Utonukwa brought together the leaders of then Zaire, Mobutu Seseko, and the leader of the fighting forces, Laurent Kabila. And these talks ultimately saw the transition from Zaire to what is today known as the Democratic Republic of Congo. We dare not forget the inter-Congolese dialogue, which we hosted as a country in Sun City for many months. Women across the continent, especially those from conflict-ridden areas, also saw it fit to even have a framework of peace. Hence, 2 weeks back, under Women in Dialogue, they were here also, and some of the women came from these conflict areas. South Africa, Chair, is an integral part of the international community, particularly the African continent. We recognize that our own security, our prosperity and sustainability, and that of Africa, of the African continent, are intrinsically connected, and therefore we understand that our own national interest is linked to Africa's stability, unity, and peace. Thus, Africa, hence we are at the center of these peacekeeping forces. So the deployment of Summit DRC was appointed by an extraordinary SADC summit of heads of government, which was held in Windhoek on the 8th of May 2023, as a regional response to address the unstable and deteriorating security situation prevailing in the DRC. So the deployments of the Summit DRC is in accordance with the principles of collective self-defense and collective action outlined in the SADC Mutual Defense Pact of 2003. Meanwhile, the United Nations Organization also has MINUSCO, which came into effect by July 2010 and was preceded by MINOC, which was there in 1999. The MINUSCO mandate, and I quote, it is to authorize to use all necessary means to carry out its mandate relating, amongst other things, to the protection of civilians, humanitarian and personal support. So, Madam Speaker, let me come back to the incident of 2 weeks ago, where our troops came under attack on the 24th of January 2025. We were indeed taken up by the tragic news that our troops based in Sake, the eastern DRC, came under heavy attack by M23 rebels. In the weeks leading to the 23rd, fighting in that region had escalated, with the rebels group fiercely engaging with the Congolese armed forces. And the intensified fight of M23 made sure that key towns in the province of Kivu, like Masisi, Ngungu, Bidada, and Minova, and all the time the rebels were advancing towards Sake, where the Summit DRC main operating base is located, and this led to our own forces being enveloped. The M23 launched an all-out attack on Summit DRC main operation base, where South African, Malawian, and Tanzanian contingent, together with UNESCO and also the Congolese defense, were located. Heavy shelling of the base was experienced, and this was followed by ground attack aimed at our operational base. M23 attacks were in clear contravention of the Nairobi peace process, and the ceasefire brokered by the Luanda process. SANDF stood firm in defense of Sake for 3 days, with battling lasting up to 9 hours of continuous fighting without any pause. SANDF managed to contain the situation to repel the attack. M23, with some of their elements, were seen to started withdrawing from the town and M23 suffered heavy casualties as reported by United Nations of ensuing period. It is during this time that we as a country saw 9 casualties, 12 injuries, varying in different degrees. And following the exchange mortar bombs again between DRC and the armed forces of 23 rebels on the 27th of January now, near Goma Airport, where South African Defense Force is co-located with even the Congolese Defense Force, where we lost 3 members and some suffered serious injuries. And one of our soldiers who had been killed, who had been hurt in Goma, succumbed to his injuries. As a result, leading us to 14, with one of our members being shot in Goma, bringing to 14. Of the people that have passed on, 7 come from Limpopo, 3 are from the Free State, 1 each from Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, and Northwest Province. And all the members will be raised to rest in full military honors for their sacrifice. And Chair, I must say, from the latest reports, yes, indeed, the delay is very disheartening. Currently, from the reports we're receiving, that they are still in Uganda, undergoing all the medical processes, and which we also are pressing very hard to get our deceased. We were hoping that we'll get them by today, but by the latest, we are told that Thursday they will be here. The South African National Defense members' ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty is a stark reminder of the dangers that are faced by young men and women in peacekeeping missions. Our soldiers are deployed to the eastern part of the DRC in North Kivu, a province that has been plagued by violence and instability for many years. And the primary threat in this region is as a result of M23, an illegal armed group that has been responsible for numerous attacks on both civilians and the DRC military forces. However, the presence of many other armed groups in the eastern DRC vying for control over its rich natural resources has led to widespread violence, displacement of civilians, and humanitarian crisis. South African National Defense Force, therefore, in the DRC, is part of UNESCO. I hear say South Africa, what we're not armed, we're part of UNESCO. We're not there in our own individual capacity as a country. On the one hand, and we are also part of SEMI-DRC, working together with other forces of the continent. As I conclude, Chair, I'd like to take the opportunity to express our condolences to the bereaved families and the entire South Africa and wish speedy recovery to the injured. Furthermore, we continue to be committed to the safety and well-being of our remaining soldiers in Goma through the already announced measures by the Eastern African Committee and SADC Summit and the opening of lines of Goma. We are working hard to make sure that the challenges our members are facing, like low supplies of food, are being attended to, and definitely we do believe that in the next few days they'll be there. Chair, what has really also brought relief to the challenges that we're facing there, it's the resolutions that members have mentioned of the SADC and the Eastern African communities, who amongst others, who amongst others have called for the unconditional ceasefire, the provision of humanitarian assistance, the development of securitarization, and the immediate opening of Goma Airport, which we believe will bring lots of relief to the dire situation that we are confronted with. Thank you very much, Chair.
Honourable the Deputy Minister of Social Development.
Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, our Defence Force is not as bad as many honourable members wants to make it to sound. Our Defence Force is well equipped. Just try us. Our Minister of Defence can be relied on to keep the country safe. Try her. Her deputies are ready for war. Try them. We have the best generals in Africa. Try them. Deputy Speaker, there's no place for warmongers in the 7th Parliament. We don't want to rout M23 or anyone. We also don't retreat. There are many dimensions to this complicated conflict, and I want to focus on one dimension. South Africa is a signatory to the Convention on Genocide. Rwanda's genocide, where many Tutus were massacred, is only matched by the massacre of women and children of Gaza by the Israeli army. We commend the Commander-in-Chief for South Africa's commitment to the Genocide Convention by sending a peace mission to the DRC, where Tutus and Hutus have started a new front, and Hutus want to finish the job. But the head of the president of Rwanda, we must say, it doesn't seem as if his hands is clean. South Africa must stay until its mission ends. We must refresh our troops. Those who call for South Africa to get out of Rwanda are only trying to deflect our commitment to prevent genocide. South Africa is committed to silence the guns, but in the DRC we need a strong secretariat to get peace that is needed. It was Julius Nyeri, and I read his memos last night, who established a strong secretariat to get Uhuru all over Africa. This is what we need now, a well-funded secretariat to get peace in the DRC and the surrounding countries. I would like to thank President Ramaphosa for the lowering of the flags to lift our morale as we continue to be the champions to fight genocide. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Minister of Land Reform and Rural Development.
Deputy Speaker, 14 of our soldiers lost their lives whilst protecting the lives of innocent Africans. Whilst you are right in our view that these deaths are a tragic loss of life, we should equally commemorate and even celebrate our martyred soldiers with honor and pride. They gave their lives to defend fellow Africans and advanced democracy and maintain peace. We support the view that has been expressed that the underfunding of our defense force must come to an end. A military that is underfunded leaves the entire country vulnerable to attack. There is nothing that attracts cowards and dictators more easily to a fight than when they believe that they are not prepared and not ready to defend yourself. Our soldiers must be viewed as martyrs for democracy and peace, and we call upon Defense Minister to posthumously give these soldiers highest military honors for their sacrifice. We unequivocally support the SANDF as part of SADC mission or any mission to support justice, democracy and peace on the African continent. The role of armies of African states must first and foremost be for national defense and not to advance the agenda of former colonizers and imperialists. African armies must never be used to divide the nations and peoples of the African continent. We must remain resolute in our role in advancing justice, peace and human rights, both in international institutions such as ICJ and on the various war zones across the African continent. We must never waver in commitment to achieving the African Union's cardinal objective of silencing the guns on our beloved continent. We must not be swayed or threatened by traitors elsewhere on the African continent or here at home or by any white supremacist foreign leader. We must increase our efforts to build a united and patriotic nation. I thank you.
The Honourable Mashlatsi.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Kgotso Africa. Ke qale ka ho fitisa matshidiso ho bahale ba rona ho malapa a bona khothalang. We stand here today in mourning, in frustration and in outrage. Our soldiers, patriots who sought to defend this country have been killed in the DRC. And yet we are not even sure that the number we've been given is accurate. We wonder how many more lives have been lost that remain unreported. How many more families are grieving in silence, unsure of the fate of their loved ones. This tragedy exposes the recklessness, poor coordination, lack of leadership within the SANDF and the government at large. The so-called peacekeeping mission in the DRC has turned into a death trap for our soldiers. A mission that was poorly planned, ill-equipped, and seemingly executed with a little regard for the safety of our men and women. This government has failed our army both administratively and operationally. The Commander-in-Chief of the Defense, President Ramaphosa, must answer to this failure. It was under his watch that our soldiers were deployed into a volatile conflict zone without proper strategy and support. South Africa is not at war, yet our government is treating our soldiers as expendable resources in a foreign conflict while failing to protect them. Where was the threat assessment? Where was the threat and risk assessment? Where was the contingency plan? Where was the leadership? Our minister, Menji Mutsecha, has also demonstrated gross incompetence. How does the minister remain silent for days while the lives of our soldiers are lost? The minister must account to the nation. She must explain why our troops were sent into harm's way without necessary intelligence, logistical support, and strategic backing. If she cannot do that, then she must step down. In a so-called government of national unity, why was the experience of General Bantu Holomisa ignored? Let us ask ourselves,
In the point of order, please go ahead and state in which point you are raising.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. I'm rising on Rule 85. The Honorable Member says the Minister has demonstrated grossly incompetence So he is making personal reflections on the dignity of the minister. Can you please rule on that, Deputy Speaker? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member, before you proceed, Rule 85 refers to reflections upon members, the President and ministers of deputy ministers who are not members of the Assembly. I will refer this for a ruling. Honourable Member at the podium, please proceed.
Kani Mambo. Let us ask ourselves, who truly benefit from South Africa's military involvement in the DRC? Is it the people of South Africa? The answer is no. Is it the families who have lost their loved ones? No. The reality is that the mission serves the interest of the political elite and the global power who want to maintain the grip on African resources. Our government, instead of prioritizing the needs of our citizens who suffer from hunger, landless, crime, unemployment, and failing infrastructure, have chosen to sacrifice South African lives for the agenda of the imperialist. As the UAT, we demand immediate accountability. Okay. Kanimambo.
The Honourable Minister of Tourism.
Deputy Speaker, as the Good Party, we send our heartfelt condolences to the families and the loved ones of the 14 fallen soldiers who tragically lost their lives while bravely defending civilians and infrastructure in the DRC. We thank the fallen soldiers and their fellow compatriots for their bravery and role they are playing in silencing the guns in Africa, the African Union's initiative to end violence in our continent. As we learned in South Africa, through the negotiating process that ended apartheid, it is only through proactive mediation that complex and protected violence can be ended. We call on the AU and the United Nations to continue to pressure all parties to go back to the negotiating table so that the Luanda peace process may result in lasting peace in the DRC. It is important to note that the SANDF forces have been in the region for many years. First as part of MONUSCO mission and now through the SAMIDRC mission. And I think it's too long. South Africa prides itself on being a force for peace in Africa, and we continue to play this role as one of the most vital voices on our continent. We echo the calls by the extraordinary SADC summit to engage all the state and non-state sectors and actors involved in the conflict to embark on a ceasefire process, protecting innocent lives and allowing much-needed access to humanitarian aid. This must be followed by the dialogue that is needed to restore peace and allow one of Africa's most conflict-ridden regions a chance to prosper. In order to truly bring a long-lasting peace into the continent, we need to refer back to the AU Master Roadmap of practical steps to silencing the guns. Finally, we need to address the root causes and conflict, including economic and social disparities in the continent, to silence the guns. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Sokanyile.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I rise today to address this House
on a matter of a critical national importance, brought to the spotlight by the recent casualties incurred of our soldiers in the Eastern DRC. My contention is that as we mourn the tragic loss of our brave soldiers, we must also extend our deepest condolences to their families and their loved ones, while acknowledging a week of mourning declared by our President, Ntate President Cyril Ramaphosa, who has called for the flags to be flown at half-mast in their honor. During this solemn period, we reflect on how we can continue to uphold their legacy of peace and sacrifice. All members, the men and women who lost their lives, made the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good of humanity. All members, it is important to understand the context of our peacekeeping mission in Africa and to see recent events as part of our long tradition of upholding democratic values internally and amongst our neighbors. Our foreign policy is rooted in the principles of multilateralism, peace, and friendship. We are guided by the constitutional values of our obligations to the AU and the Southern African Development Community, that is SADC, and the United Nations. South Africa has constantly demonstrated its commitment to a better Africa and a better world, recognizing that peace and security are essential to sustainable development and development and economic prosperity. Allow me, honorable members, to remind you of aspects of our peacekeeping mission. Since the advent of democracy, we have deployed our forces in peacekeeping missions across the continent and beyond. For instance, in Burundi, where our troops played a vital role in stabilizing the country and supporting transition to democracy. In Sudan's Darfur region, again, we contributed significantly to the AU United Nations hybrid operation known as UNAMID. Our involvement in the Central African Republic, despite its challenges, also demonstrated our willingness to protect civilians and uphold regional security. Through peacekeeping efforts, we uphold our international responsibilities and reaffirm our dedication to conflict resolution. Our engagement in peacekeeping mission are evidence of our belief that diplomacy and stability go hand in hand. We remain committed in AU Silencing the Gun initiative and will continue to play an active role in ensuring a peaceful commitment. Honourable members, our peacekeeping mission have strategic importance. We know that our own peace and prosperity depend upon the peace and prosperity of our neighbors. There can be no peace for us if there is no peace in areas surrounding us. Therefore, the deployment in the Eastern DRC under both SADC mission and Eastern DRC, known as semi-DRC, and the United Nations, known as MONUSCO, are designated to support regional stability, protect civilians, and bolster governance and structures in conflict-ridden areas. While we acknowledge the risk associated with this operation, it is imperative to recognize the strategic importance of our contribution. Instability in any part of Africa has a potential to spill over and affect our regional security. Our presence in peacekeeping mission aligns with our long-standing commitment to multilateralism and cooperative security efforts. We must continue to strengthen our military capabilities to ensure that we remain prepared to safeguard peace and stability. This includes deepening our partnership with international allies, enhancing defense diplomacy, leverage technology, and naturally ensuring that our troops have the resources they need in every eventuality. Our commitment to multilateralism and regional security must be articulated clearly and constantly. We call upon the stakeholders, including media and civil society, to support the dissemination of information accurately regarding our peace efforts. Our efforts are not driven by hostilities, but by commitment to promoting stability and peace and ensuring that we contribute to the security and well-being of the region and beyond. Honourable members, the sacrifice of our soldiers continues the legacy of those who fought for our freedom. From the struggle against apartheid to today's peacekeeping efforts, their dedication reflects the values of peace, justice, and unity, and they have shaped our nation. By honoring their service, we strengthen our commitment to building peaceful and stable continent for all. In conclusion, let us reaffirm our commitment to the principles that guide our foreign and defense policies. The loss of our brave soldiers is a stark reminder of the sacrifices made in the pursuit of peace. Their legacy must inspire us to strengthen our resolve in ensuring a security and a stable continent. As representatives of the people, we have a duty to support our armed forces, advocate to their welfare, and ensure that the missions are adequately resourced. Together, we must continue working towards a South Africa that is not only a leader in peacekeeping, but a nation that upholds its international obligations with integrity and determination. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Powell.
Madam Deputy Speaker, let me begin by extending my deepest condolences to the families of our brave soldiers who have lost their lives in this terrible war. Honourable members, the situation in the eastern DRC is dire. Nearly 3,000 civilians have been slaughtered by M23's recent advance into Goma. 500,000 people have been displaced, adding to the 2 million already fled. Just last week, 150 female inmates were raped and burned to death in the Goma jailbreak. In total, this conflict has claimed an estimated 5 million lives after the last 3 decades. The truth is that South Africa is in no position to take on the role of a peacemaker or a mediator. Neither is the SADC, which, like ANC government leaders, has repeatedly failed to uphold even basic democratic principles, rubber stamping rigged elections in Zimbabwe and Mozambique, and most likely the DRC itself. This is aside from the multi-cycle budget cuts that have hollowed out our defense force, rendering our troops immobilized. Our base in the DRC struggles with critical shortages of medicine, food, and ammunition. Roval helicopters are unavailable. All but one of our 26 Griffins sit idle. This abomination cannot continue. Make no mistake, this conflict is about politics and money. M23's advances are not ideological. They are designed to consolidate control over critical mineral resources and supply lines to Rwanda. The United Nations reported in December that the M23 generated $800,000 in taxes on mineral trades each month. These armed militia are now able to tax the 40 tons of goods that move through Manova Bay daily. Despite the tragedy unfolding, it was a grave miscalculation for our government to have involved South Africa in this intractable conflict. President Ramaphosa has claimed that as a country, we have a duty to support the nations that helped secure our liberation. This is a ruse. South Africa's soldiers have been sent to die in a war that is not ours in order to safeguard the financial interests of the ANC and their benefactors. SANDF's deployment to the DRC is perhaps tied to the commercial and mining interests of the very men who, working with ex-President David Mabuza, helped to secure the Honourable Cyril Ramaphosa's ascension to the ANC presidency in 2017. Executive chairperson of the Guma Group and founder of Gajima, Robert Gumedi's ties to the ANC are no secret, having provided millions in election funding. Guma has acquired a number of prospecting rights for oil and gas in the Great Lakes region, whilst their mining concessions in the DRC are public knowledge. Gumedi's company interests specifically target mineral resources in the North Kivu province. The ANC's willingness to compromise our national sovereignty for political and financial gain is not just limited to mining interests, but it extends to the infrastructure of our nation. Huawei's partnership with Gumedi's Gajima, which, working with China, helped to consolidate government's ICT infrastructure into a single cyber cloud, paints a murky picture of intersecting interests driven by corporate greed and political ambition. The same corruption that has infected our government has now dragged our soldiers into a foreign war. Mining rights and political interests coincide at the intersection of our soldiers' dead bodies, and our country needs to be talking about this and loudly. Questions must also be asked about the Grand Enga Dam project. South Africa must now urgently demand SANDF's withdrawal. Recognizing the role that Rwanda has played in destabilizing the Great Lakes region, we must unite in calling for the sanctioning of Rwandan political and military figures who have enabled this illegal advance into sovereign territory in the DRC. This House must join in international calls for an embargo on illegally mined minerals that are exported from the region. We must demand the full implementation of the Luanda-Nairobi peace process mediated by credible political leaders whose political campaigns are not funded by mining magnates with direct financial interests in the region. The lives of our soldiers can no longer be traded for the profits of the ANC's elite. I thank you.
Honourable the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation.
Honourable members, I stand shoulder to shoulder with my esteemed parliamentary colleagues, united in our tribute to the fallen heroes of our National Defence Force members, the Malawi Defence Force members, the Tanzanian Defence Force members, and the Uruguay Defence Force, under the UNESCO and the Summit DRC. It is not just a tragedy for our country. It is a tragedy that has befallen UNESCO. It is a tragedy that has also befallen the Summit DRC. It is an international tragedy. The budget and resources for the mission doesn't only come from the South African National Defence Force. It comes from SADC through the Summit DRC and also through the UN Security Council. The argument that the mission is not well funded or is underfunded, therefore is devoid of the truth. Because the budget comes from the UN, Summit DRC, and indeed we also contribute. So it is therefore unfounded that we have sent our troops without a clearly defined budget. Because in instances of these kind of missions, it's not the responsibility of a single country. Hence, we had Malawi, we had Uruguay, we had Tanzania, and other countries participating in UNESCO that are funded through the UNESCO process. As a nation, we have a responsibility to protect, defend, and encourage our defense force. Let us collectively embrace their memory, cherish their lives lost, and enable cause for peace.
The security situation in the Eastern DRC predates 1994 and has escalated over time. Several illegal armed groups, including the ADF, FDLR, LRA, Red Tabara, and M23, continue to operate in the Eastern DRC and have since morphed into about 150 local armed groups with a presence in North and South Kivu provinces. The recent developments in the Eastern DRC could reconfigure these groups. The net outcome of this scenario has been cynical insecurity, displacement both internally and externally, sexual exploitation and abuse as well as gender-based violence as an instrument of war, illicit exploitation and trafficking of natural resources, and erosion of authority of the state, amongst others. Human security and development has thus been extensively undermined. Various peace initiatives have recognized the need for a dialogue with all armed groups and the state actors to resolve the conflict. Hence, the recent summit of East Africa and the SADC region resolving on this matter again. There has also been recognition of a peacekeeping mission to support the government of the DRC in achieving peace. Hence, the UN deployed in the various stages of the conflict. SADC and East Africa community. There has been various deployments from the UN, SADC, and many other missions to the DRC, because there is a recognition that the DRC alone cannot handle this conflict. There is also a recognition that no one country can help resolve the conflict. The current mission of Summit DRC is not an exception on the need. South Africa's peacekeeping contribution in the Democratic Republic of Congo over the years, through personnel deployed as part of infantry battalion, helicopter units, and military medical teams, have been essential to efforts to build peace and ensure the health and safety of our fellow peacekeepers. This is not me speaking. These are the words of the Under-Secretary General of Peace Operation, Jean Peace Lecroix of the United Nations, if you thought it's propaganda. Our freedom is a product of international solidarity. One of the pillars of our struggle was international solidarity. This led to the frontline states playing a key role in our struggle. Hence, we ended up with the Battle of Kute Canovaro in Angola, the Maseru massacre, and the Matole raid by the Medara's apartheid regime. Since the dawn of our democracy, our country has been an unwavering champion for peace and justice in the continent and the globe. The principle of sovereignty, integrity of nation, as contained in Article 2 of the UN Charter, is sacrosanct. It must be defended by all peace-loving nations of the world, and South Africa is no exception. It is against this background that the SADC also has its own in terms of Article 6 of the SADC Treaty on Defense, which states the following: an armed attack on a state party shall be considered as a threat to the regional peace and security and shall be met with immediate collective action. We are not immune to regional conflict. Hence, we have got the responsibility to defend, protect, and ensure peace in the region, and an attack and response to any security situation in our region. Recognizing that a peaceful Africa is crucial for economic and social development for the continent, we participated in a lot of peace missions in the continent, in Sudan, Ethiopia, Mozambique, South Sudan, and so on, to silence the guns in line with Vision 2063 of the African Union. In the DRC, we have not only participated through Summit DRC, we have participated in building a state from the scratch, helping SARS, helping all measures of state building. We are currently in South Sudan doing the same, helping South Sudan to transition to a democratic elections. This will not happen out of context. It has to be a deliberate, progressive policy of the South African government to intervene in the continent. And we will do so unapologetically. We have a responsibility and will not be blackmailed by those who accuse our president or anyone, or even the ANC, of some kind of economic interest. As I have stated, all our missions have been informed by the UN Charter, by the SADC Protocol, by our interest to see peace in the continent and nothing else. It is also our interest to see economic prosperity anywhere in the African continent. Hence, you have South African companies in most parts of the African continent. There is no part of the continent where you don't have South African companies. You have MultiChoice in Nigeria and all over the country. You have got MTN all over the continent. It's a duty we owe to the continent to ensure that there is economic prosperity, because economic prosperity anywhere in the continent is economic prosperity in South Africa. According to the UN, we are one of the most receiving countries of migrants in the continent. It is therefore crucial that we play a role to maintain peace, to achieve economic stability in the continent. You will not only receive people here just because there is a conflict, but conflicts arise out of a fight for natural resources, for economic challenges. That's why our policy on foreign policy is very clear. Support peace and stability through dialogue, which we are supporting through multilateral platform. But we also have an economic policy that must help in terms of economic diplomacy to ensure that the African continent prosper. The Africa Free Trade Program and various flagships programs aim to resolve the economic challenges of our continent, are part of the progressive policies of this government of South Africa. And this is acknowledged across the globe, not only in the African continent. The UN Security Council recognized the important role played by South Africa in peacekeeping mission in the continent. The UN recognized the role played by South Africa in the economic development in the African continent. The debate on critical minerals in the continent, we are one of those that are leading this discussion. We will be soon hosting the G20. We have a responsibility as a country to drive to ensure that the debate on critical minerals, it must benefit the African continent. We do not fail to succeed and achieve in this phase of the minerals endowment this continent has. So this House, in this critical juncture, has got a collective responsibility to help the government of national unity to ensure that there is peace in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. We have got a collective responsibility not only on political and economic grounds. The ECDC has warned that if this conflict goes unattended, we run a risk of a pandemic in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, but which can override all over the continent. This is a mostly densely populated society, not only in Africa, but in the whole world. So we will be reckless, we will be irresponsible not to participate to resolve the conflict in the Eastern DRC. We have a duty to ensure that this conflict is resolved through the EAC and also through the SADC mission, which I have already stated and I have spoken about. It is an important instrument that must assist us to resolve this conflict and through the processes of the African Union. I have heard honorable members saying we must withdraw. And some of them have said we must do it now. I want to say that an abrupt withdrawal, as called upon by some in the House, is not even a tactical retreat. It is even worse than a surrender. As with the numbers of armed groups in the area, there lies an ambush. How do you immediately withdraw when there are 150 armed groups that are not controlled by anyone? You are sending our troops yourself to an ambush, because as they leave, they will be running to many ambushes that are uncoordinated and unknown. It is against this background, that the South African government support the processes of the East Africa and the SADC region of a ceasefire, of reopening of the Goma airport, of reopening of the supply routes to enable the normalization of the situation. When the situation has been normalized and there has been a proper assessment, our boys and men will definitely come back home. But there must be a process there must be calculated means that are undertaken, that we make sure that what we are deployed for them does materialize, does exist, and it is achieved. We will not deter as the South African government. We will march forward to ensure peace in the Eastern DRC. Thank you very much.
Honourable members. Order, honourable members. On behalf of the presiding officers, we would also like to extend our deepest condolences to the families of the fallen soldiers. Honourable members, that then closes the debate. And please, members, also, I request you to stand and wait for the presiding officer and the mace to leave the chamber. The House is adjourned.